वेलकम टू आवर नेशन स्टेट डायलॉग सीरीज राष्ट्र राज्य संवाद श्रृंखला में आपका स्वागत है. 欢迎收看民族国家对话系列. I'm Dr. Geeta Kochar, moderator for today's discussion. Today, it's our pleasure to have with us Professor Wei Zongyou. Professor Wei Zongyou is at the Center for American Studies, Fudan University, China. He is the council member of the Chinese Society for American History, council member of the Shanghai Association for American Studies, and standing council member of the China Society for Asia Pacific Studies. He got his doctorate in international relations from Fudan University and was a Fulbright senior visiting scholar at the Georgetown University. His primary research focuses on the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy, the U.S. alliance system in the Asia-Pacific region, and U.S.-China relations. He is the author of 2 monographs and co-author of a collaborative volume and has published over 70 scholarly articles in leading academic journals in both Chinese and English. So welcome to our show, Professor Wei. Let me begin by asking you, how do you see the U.S.-China relations evolve, particularly in the context of President Trump here, who's planning to visit China? And what is on the table for discussion, and what outcomes do you expect after the meeting?
You see, since U.S. President Trump entered the White House for the second time, the China-U.S. relations has undergone some difficulties, especially in the area of economic. You see, Trump imposed tariffs against China in his first year, and China also retaliated against the United States. So I think the first year of the China-U.S. relations could be characterized by this kind of tit for tat in the tariffs. And then both China and the United States realized this kind of tariff war would bring no benefit to either country. So both China and the United States has the willingness to hold dialogues to diffuse this kind of trade tensions. So far we have seen 6 round talks try to stabilize this kind of economic relations and try to find a way out of this tariff war. And then since October last year, President Xi Jinping and the U.S. President Trump met in South Korea, and both leaders decided that they will meet again. And Trump, he also expressed his willingness or his hope that he would visit China this year. So in the coming days, I think in 2 weeks' time, Trump would visit China. I think this will be a very important leader-to-leader summit between China and the United States. And the most important issue, I think, is, of course, the economic issue, how to diffuse this kind of tariff between China and the United States. Of course, China wants that the United States will continue to reduce the tariffs against China. You see, since the first term of Donald Trump in 2017 and 2021, he imposed about more than 20% tariffs against all Chinese goods exported to the United States. So far, the United States has maintained around 25 to 28% overall tariffs against all Chinese exports to the United States. And then since Trump entered to the White House for the same time last year, so far he has also imposed now around 20% tariffs against China. So if we added all those tariffs together, the Chinese goods exported to the United States is about around 48 or 45, depending on how you calculate. overall, it's about more than 40% tariffs the United States imposed against China. So of course, China wants this summit meeting will make the tariffs against China be a little bit lower. Presumably, I think China wants the United States to reduce these 20% new tariffs against China since 2025. So I think that's a main issue. Of course, there's lots of other issues the two leaders want to talk frankly, but I think the economic issue, especially the tariffs, will be the most important issue of this summit meeting. Dr. Gita.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, what we are seeing today is a crisis in the Middle East. There's the Middle East conflict that's happening. So what do you see as China's position and how it wants to deal with the US, Israel, and its partner Iran, even if a peace deal has been proposed by China, but nothing has actually worked to end the conflict? So where do you see China's position in all of this?
Well, China's overall position toward the Middle East conflict is very clear. Firstly, China does not want a war or conflict in the Middle East. So China does not suppose, of course, China in fact oppose the Israeli war against Iran and also the US war against Iran. So China's overall position is very clear. You could not use war against another sovereignty state. If there are some issues between the two countries should sit down and talk instead of using force to pressure the other side, or even a regime change. Of course, China does not support and strongly oppose this kind of regime change remarks. And of course, China also proposed, as always, once the Iran and the United States could resume their peace talks to find a way how to diffuse the tension and to to end this war and resume the peace in the Middle East. And besides, I think China wants the freedom of navigation in the Gulf area, especially the Hormuz Strait, is a very important international maritime pathway. So not only for the Gulf states, they export their oil products, but also the other countries, they export goods through the Hormuz Strait. So China also wants the freedom of navigation along the Hormuz Strait, and against any party to interfere with that freedom of navigation.
But how do you see that going to affect China domestically or internationally? I mean, the entire conflict.
Yeah, I think you see China's, the Middle East is one of the very important source of China's import of the oil. I think China imports around 1/3 of its oil from the Middle East at least. So, and besides, China also exports some goods to the Gulf states. So I think this kind of the blockade of the Hormuz Strait and also the war in the Middle East overall, of course, impact China's export to the Middle East and imports oil from the Middle East. So of course it affects China's economically. Besides, I think China's overall foreign policy approach is against war, against using war to deal with the differences or this kind of quarrels among states. So China wants the parties to the quarrels to solve their differences by means of negotiation, by means of diplomacy, or by peaceful means instead of using force in the Middle East.
So, but I mean, when we talk about all of this conflict and everything, and Trump's upcoming visit to China, one of the things which is often talked about and comes into play is a lot of talk about G2, right? Or at times a new multipolar world that is going to emerge. How do you assess the situation globally, and what is China's position on this G2 thing that is being talked about?
Well, of course, now in today's world, the world is entering into a kind of multipolarity. China always supports the multipolarity in the international affairs and in the international relations, and China against any one power to manipulate international affairs. China always supports the democratization of international affairs and also the multipolarity of international relations. So in this way, China supports this mega trend of multipolarity. But China has a kind of does not think the world has entered into a kind of G2 world, because besides China and the United States, there are also other major powers or major players in international relations. For example, India is also a major player in international affairs, and besides Russia and also EU as a whole, they are also very important international actors. So those are several international actors. They play a more and more important role in dealing with the peace, security, or the prosperity or global governance in today's world. So it's not an era of G2. Instead, I think the world has entered a kind of multipolarity in the international relations.
I'll come to that Russia-India thing later. But let me talk about the manipulation factor that you just put in. I mean, one of the things about manipulation of entire international thing is posed on, dollar being the, currency which creates a problem. So de-dollarization is the talk of the town. And also, simultaneously, people are talking about internationalization of RMB in China. So where do you see these progress, and how easy or difficult it would be for China to push forward with these? I mean, especially the de-dollarization and as well as internationalization of RMB. And in your opinion, what are the challenges in realizing these objectives from the Chinese perspective?
Well, as China's economic growth, and nowadays China is the number two in GDP terms of the world. So as China's economic growth and China's overall power growth, of course, China's currency has more influence in the international trade. But so far, China's renminbi is not a convertible currency in the international trade. Of course, China has experienced the use of renminbi in bilateral trade, but so far, compared to the US dollars, China's renminbi's influence is still not that big. And I think it will a long time before China's renminbi will be a major player in the international currency. And as for the digitalization of renminbi, I'm not quite familiar with that issue, so I cannot comment on that topic. Sorry.
No, that's okay. No, but what do you see? I mean, you said it will take a long time. So what are the challenges that you can highlight in terms of, the problems that internationalization will not be so very easy for China?
I think, firstly, China is very cautious in the internationalization of renminbi. And so far, renminbi is not a convertible currency in international trade. And of course, China wants renminbi will play a much bigger and more important role in international trade. But I don't think China will be hurry on that issue. And China will be very patient and cautious, and just let it take the natural course instead of try to speed up this process. I think it just take time.
Oh, okay. So let me go back to your, proposition about Russia and India. So Russia has actually proposed of RIC, the Russia, India, China, in order to counter the US sole supremacy. In your opinion, what is China's position and how will it impact the US-China relationship?
I think the United States, China, India, Russia, and EU are very important players in today's international relations. So of course, Russia is China's very important neighbor, and China-Russia relations, I think, is very good. Is very good nowadays, both economically, politically, and strategically. And China's leaders and Russia's leaders, they have very good relations, and there are some mechanisms between China's leaders and the Russian leaders. They meet maybe once a year or twice a year. So they are very good political relations, and also China-Russia economic relations are also relatively good. So China values its relations with Russia. Russia also values its relations with China. But China's relations with Russia is not a zero-sum game against the United States. The United States or China also values its relations with the United States. Firstly, the US is a very important export market for China's goods. Secondly, the United States is the number one world power, and China, of course, does not want its relations with the United States to deteriorate. And thirdly, the United States has also its alliance system in the Indo-Pacific, in the Asia-Pacific. There are some quarrels between China and the United States concerning the trade, concerning the Taiwan issue, and some South China Sea issue. But overall, China wants to remain a very constructive and stable relations with the United States. And India is also a very important neighbor of China. And nowadays, I think China and China's relations with India has gradually turned for the better, and both sides has a willingness to improve the bilateral relations economically and also politically, and especially in today's world of great uncertainty and flux. I think those relations, China's relations with the US, China's relations with Russia, China's relations with India, and relations with EU are also very important. I think China tries to maintain a stable, constructive relations with all those very important partners, not at the expense of the other parties.
Okay, but I think, with regards to US-China relation, one of the things which is going to be very crucial, and, China has clearly stated about that, is the main hurdle in peaceful reunification of the two states. So what is your opinion on it? And how do you see do you see a serious conflict happening between the US and China over the Taiwan issue?
China, the Taiwan issue, as China's always maintains that it's a domestic issue, and China will use its own ways to reunification with Taiwan. But China will be very patient, and the peaceful means will be the first choice. Only if the Taiwan declares independence or something like that, China will use whatever means to deter Taiwan from declare independence. So I don't think China will be in a very hurry to use force to realize the reunification with Taiwan. And of course, China is not very happy with what the United States has done towards Taiwan, including its military sale to Taiwan, and also its high-level interaction between the U.S. government and the Taiwan authority. And China is also not very happy about the United States urging Japan, urging Australia, and urging some other Asian allies to coordinate their positions with the United States concerning the Taiwan issue, especially China is not very happy or is very worried about the U.S. so-called the forward military posture or deployment along the so-called the first island chain to try to increase its so-called deterrence, denial deterrence against China. So China's position on the Taiwan issue is very clear. Firstly, it's a domestic issue. Secondly, whatever means China will use to reunite Taiwan is China's domestic issues. And thirdly, China will be very patient in realizing this issue, and the peaceful reunification will be the first priority. And of course, China also try to use whatever means to dissuade the United States to interfere in this in Taiwan issue. Yeah.
Okay, so I understand how China is looking at this, and it wants peace not just in the region but also no conflict for the Taiwan issue. But one of the things which is really again relating to US and China, and specifically connecting China's pulses, that is Tibet. The US is very actively engaging in neighboring countries like Nepal and Bangladesh. How does it impact China's policy in the region, and what actions China will undertake to counter the growing US influence in the region?
China's overall foreign policy principle is non-interference in the other country's domestic affairs. So in line with this overall foreign policy principle, China, of course, is not very happy, or does not. Of course, China does not support this kind of domestic domestic interference in other countries. So China, of course, does not support the U.S. interference in those countries around India. And I think in this way, both China and India has common interests. I don't think I don't think India is willing to see the U.S. interference in the domestic issues of those countries bordering India. For example, in Nepal, in Bangladesh, or in some other countries. So in this way, I think both China and India have common interests. So China and India should cooperate in this way and to voice their concerns to the United States.
I think in some of the issues, one thing which comes common is that there are issues which US is imposing on China, and there are issues which US is imposing on India as well. Say for in terms of the tariffs that we have been talking about, and I see there are common interest, common aspirations of both of these countries which converge at times, and that is where cooperation and coordination is essential. So thank you, Professor Zongyou. Thank you for taking your time and giving us some insights to it. I hope these conversations keep continue, and for our viewers, please keep watching, liking, and subscribing to our channel. We'll have much more interesting academic discussions, especially from renowned scholars, policymakers, and think tank heads or global experts. And I hope you will like our video, and you'll support us for having much more of these interesting discussions. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you.